Thank you all for being here. It's me, Ari Dusset, or as you already know me, Rashid. Please, if you're here, let me know in the live chat, please. Thank you very much. I'm also streaming from Twitter. I'm not sure if you can leave comments on the Twitter stream. The Twitter stream is quite recent, but anyway, when you're here, let me know in the live chat, please. Thank you. And in this live stream, or best at class, I'm talking about two subjects that are often ignored or seldom spoken about amongst believers. We know what generational curses are. Violence that transcends, that goes from one generation to the next. Conflicts that outlive a generation. That's what generational curses are. Now we know that. But what is there at the root of generational curses? I mean, what are the factors that keep generational curses in existence? Now, again, this is not about generational curses, but what keeps generational curses going. Now, the word ignorance. The word ignorance has the root word ignore. Ignore simply means you pretend something is not there or you refuse to give something attention. Now, in daily life, you can't give attention to everything. That's not possible as a human being, neither should you. So certain things you ignore. For example, you can be on your way to work and you have this guy screaming on the street. Unless he's about to harm himself or jump into the traffic to kill himself, you should stop and pay attention to it. But if that's not the case, if he's just on drugs, screaming around, falling to the ground, or if he's drunk, falling to the ground, the police or other people can take care of it, you can just ignore it. If you have someone leaving nasty comments on many of your videos, for example, or on your blog posts, you just know the individual wants to dump and they want to be relevant in a negative way. You can just block the individual and just ignore whatever else they're doing. Now, you can't ignore everything and everyone. If someone is in need and you refuse to pay attention to the situation, that's neglect. So ignoring something can be justified on practical reasons. Ignoring someone, if they intend to harm you or to drag you into danger, that can also be justified. But just ignoring things or ignoring people because you just don't want, because just you want or you want to prove that you have a free will or you want to prove it's your life, blah, 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 that's neglect. It can even be criminal. If your children need psychological affection and you refuse to give it to them as a parent, that's neglect and may even be criminal. If your children are underfed because you're not feeding them, that's neglect. You can go to prison for that. Now, we know what ignore is and we know what neglect is now. What if ignorance outlives a generation? Now look, you have natural ignorance. Those are things you just cannot know. For example, you did not come out of the womb speaking fluent French. You don't come out of the womb as an engineer, as a pilot. No, those are things you were shipped into after being born. So the word, if you are a pilot now, or an engineer now, or a banker now, there was a point you had no idea what banking and engineering was about. You had to learn those things. The native language you're speaking, there was a point you couldn't speak it as a little baby. You had to learn it by imitating those around you. So all human beings, they acquire information after birth. So prior to birth, you had no clue about anything, as simple as that. And while being alive, there are going to be endless things you have no clue about. You don't know, if there are 5 million people living in your state, you don't know what's going on in the head of those 5 million people. You can't read the minds of 5 million people. You can't even handle that. There can be 5,000 couples having sexual intercourse right now in the state you're living in. You know who they are. You know the background. There's too many things out there you can't handle as a single creature. So of course you don't know everything. So you have natural ignorance. That's just ignorance because you're a creature, you can't know everything. Every creature, including evil spirits and angelic beings, they all have natural ignorance. All of them have. Now, it's only the Heavenly Father who knows everything. That's obvious. You have natural ignorance, but remember, you also have artificial ignorance. Artificial ignorance comes from the root word ignore, is when you refuse to pay attention to something. Now, again, if something is not worthy of your attention, your effort, because it objectively only brings harm, you can ignore it, unless that thing is a danger, it's about to endanger you. If something is about to endanger you, you cannot ignore it. If someone is screaming on the street, drunk, not attention, you can ignore it if he's just moving around near a bench. But if he has a gun in his hand and he's drunk, oh, now you need to pay attention. Now you can't ignore it because now there's danger. So if you ignore something that you should pay attention to, that's neglect. So is it not possible that neglect can cause backwardness in a population? Yes, it does. Now, let me give an example. Let's say your great-grandparents, they moved from Italy to the United States. Let's say at the end of the 19th century. Italy was a kingdom back then, but they were from the south of Italy, and the south of Italy was neglected by the Kingdom of Italy, as it was previous centuries under Spanish rule also. So your great-grandparents moved from Italy to the United States at the end of the 19th century. However, there was already a big Italian-minded community in the United States. So the Italians that came there, many of them were not considered white because they were from the south, so they were considered to have some Arab influence. That was partially true, not completely. But anyway, you arrived there, and your great-grandparents arrived in the United States. They couldn't speak English. They smuggled their way into the country, and they were able to stay because many Italians did it. Now, let's say your grandparents grew up not speaking English. Why? Because they were only in the Italian-minded community. And because of that, they didn't need English because everything around them was arranged by fellow Italians. Over time, though the citizenship laws, your parents became American citizens. And now your father had difficulty speaking English, even though he was a second generation Italian, was born in the United States. And when you were growing up, your vocabulary of English was quite low. But yet, you had, let's say, you had Portuguese Americans from Portugal who were also third generation migrants, like you are, born into the United States, but their vocabulary of English was big. Now, what's going on here? You grew up in an environment where the English language was neglected, though to the community not considering English relevant. Now, it is true that back then, at the end of the 19th century, they could bypass using English. However, if you live in an English-speaking nation or English-speaking country, it's relevant to learn English, besides the language of your ancestors. So if you are from a migrant community in an English-speaking nation, and you have difficulty speaking English, even though both your parents and grandparents were born there, this goes to generational ignorance, which turned into generational neglect. And that is something you often see in migrant communities. If a migrant community is big, for example, you can have a Chinese migrant community in the Philippines, or you can have a French migrant community somewhere in Brazil or whatever. Anytime a migrant community is big and the migrant community contains people with businesses and with some economic leverage, the members of the migrant community have a leverage in bypassing the societal requirements of the host country they're in. Now, this is a leverage, but this leverage can also work against you. For example, there were studies done in the Netherlands that showed that the integration of the Moroccans, even though there have been in the Netherlands for three generations already, that the integration of the Moroccan community failed. And there were many Moroccans that, even though they were born in the Netherlands, started difficulty with the Dutch language. Now, by now, it's likely resolved, that situation, at least I hope so. Here's the thing. If you live in the Netherlands and you don't speak Dutch, you have a handicap. You cannot fully get along with what's going on in the country because you don't speak the language of the country. And for some reason, there were many migrants coming to the Netherlands thinking, I don't have to speak Dutch, or you show no interest. Similar in the United States, you have a lot of Hispanic people that come in thinking, hey, I know Spanish, that's enough. Now, what I'm teaching here is that ignorance can turn into neglect. Now, if there are certain things you just didn't know because you couldn't know them, you're not to blame. If you live, let's say you live in the state of New York, and there is this neighborhood somewhere with a high crime rate. Well, let's say now that the people of the state of New York are not talking about this neighborhood, just ignore that even existence of this neighborhood. And one day you drive through the neighborhood with your car, and you encounter people from the street robbing you, escalating on you. Now, is it your fault you encountered all that danger? No. Does the community around you neglected informing each other about this dangerous neighborhood? Well, let's say now you know about the bad neighborhoods and you don't inform your children or the people around you about it. And they end up passing through that neighborhood and something bad happens to them. Now, this neglect, and this is blameworthy. So it's one thing not to be aware of something. That's natural. It's nothing not to not want to be aware of something. For example, when you notice warning signals in a situation and you refuse to look into it, that's not ignorance, that is neglect. You notice something is off. For example, let's say you're in a building and you smell smoke. Where there's smoke, there's fire. There's something burning somewhere. Whether it's a piece of toast that's stuck in a toaster, or whether it's an oven that's overheated, or whether it's a fire that is about to devour the building, whether it's a small or a big fire, there is fire somewhere. Something somewhere is burning. So what do? You check, hold on a minute, I smell smoke, what's going on there? You check around to see whether everything is safe, or where the smoke comes from and what to do about it. If you smell smoke and you think, hey, I don't want to be bothered, leave me alone, that's neglect. And neglect is a common thing in the human species, unfortunately. Unfortunately, neglect is a common thing, an everyday thing in the human species. Worldly people don't want to be bothered by anything or anyone. They just want to do what they want to do without being challenged and without being hindered. Even if what they're doing is not worthwhile or what they're doing is not going to be good for them in the long run. That is fallen mankind. So when the neglect results in tragedies or it results in harmful circumstances, now the public wants to blame someone because they don't want to look in the mirror and face themselves and admit we're the ones that caused this. We're the ones that are in on this. When the neglect of the crowd or the neglect of the community becomes obvious, they look for some distraction by gang stalking a victim. They want the gang stalk victim to be the center of negative attention so nobody would notice their neglect as a community. That's why, amongst fallen mankind, anytime things go well with you, the environment wants credit for enabling the good that happened in your life. If you attend the university and you got that PhD, the people around want recognition saying, hey, that university was established by our ancestors, this and that. Well, let's say now you grew up in a community and you were neglected and you end up homeless in the streets. You were looking for jobs, nobody hired you, and later you found out that the government was in on keeping some unemployment just to boost the economy. And you were one of the people that were left unemployed and you end up on the streets. Let's say you end up dying. Who's responsible for you dying? The community is. But now they're going to say, well, the guy was a bit lazy, or if you weren't lazy, they would say, well, the market failed. They will drop on any mechanism, or they may even say, due to all those migrants we have here, this poor man that died in the street couldn't get a job. Politicians love to do this. instead of looking at the fact of dominating, this individual was born here, he wanted to contribute to the economy, he just didn't get a chance to do so. Why didn't he get a chance to do so? Because this whole thing was rigged. So it's not the fault of those migrants or of illegal migration, it's the fault of the community that neglected the individual. That's how it goes in the world, or that's how it goes in society. And then things go wrong, everyone wants to run away. And when they can't run away, they want to escalate on a victim to draw attention away from them. That is fallen mankind. So neglect is a common thing in the human species ever since the fall of man. You have generational ignorance, things that you and your ancestors were not aware of, but though this lack of knowledge, you were taken advantage of. And then you have generational neglect, that is when your ancestors refused to face something, and because they refused to face something, it led to dysfunction that was transferred from generation to generation. So, do we have a clear view now about what generational neglect and what generational ignorance is? Let me know in the live chat. So, what to do about generational ignorance? It's simple. Face the fact that there are certain things you don't know because your environment was ignorant. Admit it. For example, it can be that you grew up in an impoverished environment where people used to put the laundry outside to dry. Even though many people today use a dryer, they purchase a dryer for a few $100s and they dry their clothes. And within a half hour, the clothes are dry. Now, if you were not aware that people use this thing called a dryer, don't be embarrassed. You were just ignorant because the environment around you was impoverished. Admit that there were certain things you missed out due to the ignorance of your environment or due to your environment being impoverished. Or let's say now that there is lack of medical knowledge in a community. For example, someone can have a headache and they think, oh, I just need to take a painkiller and it's over. But it can be that the headache is a symptom of something more serious in the body. If they're from an environment where there's lack of medical supplies or medical provisions, they may think, oh, it must be it must be between my ears or whatever. But what if one day they go to the hospital and they figure out, ooh, you have diabetes or you have some other sickness. And then you tell them that your grandfather used to have headaches also and he died at an early age. And then the medical professional asks, are there more relatives of you that died at an early age? You mentioned 5 more relatives. And then the medical records of your grandfather was examined. He passed away 20 years ago, and they figured out that he had similar symptoms to you, and he had whatever disease you have also. So now the conclusion comes that due to poor diet in that community for generations, a lot of you had too much sugar in your body or too much of certain minerals in your body, and because of that, it caused diseases. So the diet of your family and people around you was an unhealthy diet. But because everyone had a diet since birth, you guys didn't know any better. You didn't. But just because you didn't know any better doesn't mean that the consequences are not there. Look, if you eat poison, you don't have to be aware it's poison, but the poison will still have an effect on your body. If someone shoots you with a gun, you may not be aware someone shot you. You may not even feel the bullet enter your body, but the bullet is there. So not being aware of something doesn't mean the thing you're not aware of does not exist. Not being aware of something doesn't cancel out how that thing may affect you. Let's say you live in a neighborhood where there are many venomous snakes. You're not aware those venomous snakes even exist because you're never informed about it and you never saw one of them. That doesn't cancel out the danger of you encountering venomous snake at some point while living there. So not being aware of something doesn't mean that the effect of that thing does not affect you. Now, generational ignorance is healed by you acknowledging that you lack knowledge and you make up your mind to become informed. You read books, you watch documentaries, you pray, you fast, you link up with people who have more knowledge than you. So generational ignorance is only healed and restored by you becoming active in the here and now. You can't pray generational ignorance away. That's not possible. You have to involve yourself in daily life more on a practical level to become smarter, wiser, and more intelligent. So if something is caused by generational ignorance, it's useless because of evil spirits. Because those evil spirits are only there because you lack practical understanding. For example, if people in a community are still beating their children, because that's the way they calm down children, then of course there's going to be a lot of crime in the community and a lot of people with psychological disorders because they're being abused as children. Now, the ignorance of the link between child abuse, which they call discipline, and mental disorders and crime in the community, even if you don't see it, the connection is there. So once you realize, this community tends to beat children, it's common. But in this community, there's a lot of crime, and there's a lot of people with psychological disorders, a lot of people with burnouts, and also diseases. This community over here, people don't beat children, and the crime rate tends to be low. So now you realize, and now you have a minor community where they do beat children coming in, and from that minor community, you have a lot of crime, or you have a lot of people with psychosis. So now you see, okay, there's a link. So you know what? We need to learn how to properly deal with frustration of children. But before we do that, we need to deal with our own emotional frustrations first. We need to go into therapy. So self-knowledge, as well as your humility and admitting that you need knowledge, is relevant. That's how you get rid of generational ignorance, because generational ignorance is the open door that grants demons access to you. Casting out evil spirits are not going to resolve the root matter. The root matter is not the evil spirit or the people around you that exploit you. The root matter is the ignorance. For example, if you're paying taxes in many countries, you have certain benefits. If you're not aware of the benefits, you may never claim the benefits, but you're still paying. And that happens to a lot of people too. Now, but apart from a generational ignorance, now I'm going to talk about generational neglect. Generational neglect is a dysfunctional attitude in which, for generations, people refuse to deal with something. Let's say that, for example, in the Netherlands, in 1944, during the winter, there was, that means in 1944, there was this, with winter, I mean when it became colder, there was a shortage of food throughout the Netherlands. And because of this, there were many women that were pregnant that later had babies, and those people that were born, the babies were born later, had a lot of cardiac diseases in their lives. Why? Because as a little baby, still in the mother's womb, they were affected by a lot of stress hormones. So if you don't see the link between what happened in 1944 and the people who were born shortly afterwards and how it affected their lives, you're missing out on something. But anyway, what happened in 1944 was a huge trauma. Many Dutch people that were in agreement with the Nazis, they kept it quiet that the Nazis were shipping away the food supplies of the Netherlands. So when winter came and people had to purchase food from the barns and the food centers, there was no food. Only the Nazi sympathizers had food. And people turned on each other throughout the country. And later were Moroccan soldiers under the protectorate of France that came and fought against the Nazis in the Netherlands. And later the United States dropped some bombs, I believe it was in Arnhem, and the United States got the credit as if they freed the Netherlands. Now, if you're not aware of the full history, that the only reason this hunger winter happened was because the Nazis took revenge on the Netherlands for not complying with killing the Ashkenazi Jews. If you're not aware of this, you think that the hunger winter was just because of crop failure or failed harvest. Now, if you're not aware that the hunger winter was the result of crimes committed by the Nazi regime, you will not realize that it was this enormous wound that was inflicted on the Dutch community. And this wound is something that the Dutch public did not properly deal with. We didn't properly face it. So this caution of thinking, don't be too happy in life because it can end anytime, this adds to something you can still find in Dutch culture a lot. But if you ask any Dutch individual that's 20 years old today, that means we're born in, today's 2021, so they're born in 2001, if you ask them, why do you have this reserved attitude towards being happy? They don't know why, because that's how their parents raised them. You ask their parents to say, hey, that's how my parents raised me. And this goes all the way back to this national trauma that happened in 1944. Now, this trauma was not dealt with back then. So it affected the behavior of the masses. And so a collective dysfunction emerged in the Dutch community. And this dysfunction was transferred to the children, because the children grew up in a dysfunctional community. And the dysfunction became normalized. But dysfunction is still dysfunction. Dysfunction still has pollution comes along with it. So if you grew up in the Netherlands and you see that there is this toxicity of people being reserved to embrace happiness, there's something you need to be delivered from. It's generational ignorance. So you need to ask yourself, why is it so many people are so reserved to be happy? Why is it that people are so reluctant to admit that something is wrong in the country? You look at the history, then you figure out, aha, here's where it began. So once you face what happens, now your mind is retraced. And by being retraced, I mean your mind begins to process how you were raised and how people around you behave. And now, because your mind is retraced now, you are healing from that collective trauma. Even though you never went through the hunger winter in 1944, it happened decades before you were born, that trauma still affected your environment that you grew up in. So you, unaware, became part of the trauma that happened decades before. So because the trauma was internalized by you on a psychological and physical level, you became a carrier of the trauma. So as a carrier of the trauma, you had to get rid of the trauma. So you had to process what was the trauma and how do I get out of it. So trauma is often transferred generationally due to generational neglect, something people refuse to face and to process. So when it's generational neglect, it's painful, but you have to admit that the community around you has been neglectful towards each other. That means also towards you. You have to admit and see how deep the neglect goes. And once you realize that you suffered psychological, therefore also physically harm as an individual due to the neglect of the community, now you know that you need help, you need therapy, or you need to school yourself. Now you do those things, and then you are freed from the consequences of this generational neglect. What often happens, however, and this unfortunate, is when people notice warning signals that something's off, they tend to numb it down with drugs, alcohol, partying, gaming, all types of other activities. Now, there's nothing wrong with gaming or having a party or whatever, but people tend to use those things that should numb down warning signals. That's how they end up participating in the same neglect that harms them, and the generational neglect is passed on. It happens, unfortunately, way too often that neglect is passed on to the next generation. Now, if your parents or the people around you were just ignorant and their dysfunctions only due to ignorance, that means that they did not intend to pass any bad stuff towards you. It just happened because they were ignorant, they were impoverished. But if people around you realize something was off, they refuse to look for solutions, now that's neglect. Now that is generational ignorance or generational neglect. In both cases, the harmful consequences are affecting you. And the only way the harmful consequences are going to stop is when you see what's going on and you get out of the situation. How do you get out of the situation? By facing the situation and looking for ways to educate yourself and to bypass the traps of the past, then the past of the people around you. That's how simple it is. However, in many churches, they never address generational ignorance, let alone generational neglect. They just say it's all generational curses. Now, a generational curse is when a specific type of violence perpetrates from generation to generation. Well, that violence can only perpetrate because there's either something people are not aware of, that's ignorance, or something people refuse to look into, that is neglect. You can pray against generational curses all day long. You can even decree and declare and use Bible verses against generational curses. Generational curses will not just disappear because you speak out something. You have to actually take action constructively on your own behalf and on behalf of the people around you. But first, on your own behalf, to get out of this situation. The best way to shut down a generational curse is to get out of a situation. So if you grew up in Amsterdam, but you notice that there's quite some defects haunting you, move to Rotterdam or move to for a little while. You don't have to do that permanently, but move away or decide to study in another city. Sometimes moving away from an environment is enough to shut down a generational curse from harming you. Because once you're out of the toxic environment, you'll realize after a while that the environment was toxic. And now you gain knowledge. By gaining knowledge, the generational ignorance is gone. And now the generational ignorance is gone, you will now see the generational neglect. And now because you've seen the generational neglect, how pathetic and how awful and how ridiculous, how horrible it is, now you're motivated to do the opposite. So moving away, even for a moment, from the environment can be sufficient in overcoming transgenerational violence. But in churches, they prefer to pray and to shout for hours. Now, praying and shouting for hours can help if you're dealing with something that's deep-rooted in the community. But if it's just generational curse in general, you know now what to do. Move away from the situation. Then your mind will clear up. But then you'll see the ignorance. You notice that it was ignorance. You also will see the neglect. And now you can deal with both by educating yourself and becoming a better human being. That is the way forward. There is no magical wand that anyone will use that will make things better in just seconds by crying out abracadabra. No. It will not happen that way. But that's what a lot of people expect. A lot of people just want quick fixes. They just want to go to some deliverance ministry, to some deliverance service somewhere, where people lay hands on them and pray, and suddenly everything works out well. That's not how it goes. Or they just want to participate in some activity, and they expect just because they participate in some activity, suddenly they're better off. Look, this magical thinking of just wanting quick fixes all the time is something we need to give up. Quick fixes should be embedded in long-term solutions. If your car, if one of the tires of your car was broken, then you have to put a sticker or something on it till you're at some garage where a car mechanic can replace your tires. You can't keep driving around with a flat tire. We're just putting a sticker on it. It's going to put you in danger on the roads. So putting a sticker on the flat tire till you arrive at the garage is a quick fix, but it's embedded in a long-term solution. However, too many people out there, they just want quick fixes. And by the way, the current situation in the world, worldwide, you know which situation I'm talking about, with this invisible enemy that people telling you to fight against. People think that just because they participated in this agenda, that they now are part of the solution with protecting other people. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to mention it by name because I don't want to get in trouble with the algorithm of YouTube. Thing is, it's just a quick fix people are looking for. This world crisis goes on at the moment. People want a quick fix. And a quick fix is offered to them for free. They take it. And if you refuse to participate in quick fix, they see you as someone that's holding them back, or they see you as a conspiracy theorist, or a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, or whatever. Some family members even break contact with you or fight you because you don't want to participate in a quick fix. And that's the thing, when the crowd becomes desperate for a quick fix, you need to watch out. Because sooner or later, they will realize that the quick fix is not working on the long run. And once they have to face this, they'll be so humiliated and embarrassed that they will that this embarrassment and humiliation will turn into violent rage. And once it turns into violent rage, people are going to get hurt. So just be aware of that. So be aware how you address the current crisis in the world. Indeed. This is what Mark is saying. Even in the occult, people have a more practical understanding that if something is going on, you need to deal with the root of the situation. If you don't deal with the root of the situation, it will continue. And people in the occult, or let's say pagans, they are clear to themselves when something is deep-rooted. And they know that a solution is not going to be, it could be easy. And sometimes you realize that the solution is not possible because the people involved don't want to participate in the solution. So pagans are clear about this. Yet the crowd, and unfortunately even some believers who are not renewed in their minds, think that a quick fix is all that's necessary. So, generational ignorance and generational neglect both have to be addressed in the here and now by you. Forget about your parents. Forget about your grandparents if they're still alive. Forget about your ancestors who passed away, because they've passed away. You can't talk to them nor address them anymore. And they can't even change anymore because they're already passed away. So forget about them. And you can't undo the past anyway. Forget about people around you who don't want to face things. Focus on you. Focus on you improving. You need to improve. If you don't improve, you will keep attracting and getting stuck in the same cycles over and over again. So, ignorance and neglect are two things that keep many believers back. Stop focusing on Satan. Stop focusing on demons. Because too many believers are so obsessed with casting out evil spirits. Don't be focused on paranormal for a moment. Be focused on you. What is it about you that's lacking? And admit that you're lacking somewhere. And realize that Christ is the provider. So you submit to Christ and he provides and fills where you are lacking. Don't try to fill up the lack yourself, because that will only be compensation that will backfire. That's what happens in the paranormal, in the occult. They compensate their own lack. Now listen, the Heavenly Father wants your lack to be addressed in Christ. Because once the lack is addressed in Christ, it's solved forever. Any other thing will be just temporary relief, or, as already mentioned, a quick fix. Now, pagans have quick fixes that last for a little while. So they think those things are solutions, but they're deceived. It's just a quick fix. Only experienced pagans, people with experience in occult, realize that the only thing they have are quick fixes. Only Christ can bring long-term satisfactory solutions. You can be going to church every Sunday and never know basic things about Scripture. You can be going to church every Sunday for 40 years and still don't know the basics of how to pray. So don't think that just because someone is calling the name of Christ and they're attending sermons often, that they are well educated in spirituals. Often they are not. So, do you recognize generational ignorance in you? Do you recognize also generational neglect? What you do is you don't blame yourself. You decide, I want to be better. You look in the mirror and decide, in Christ's mighty name, I'm renewed in my mind, and I'm a better human being to glorify the Father. You decide that you want to be better, and you make steps towards becoming better. Forget about the people around you, the naysayers, the people that don't believe in your growth. You have to decide, I want to be better. That's the number one step into deliverance. Once you make that one step, half of the battle's already won. Don't be mistaken. Generational ignorance and generational neglect are two things that many people are simply not aware about. That is why they say knowledge is power. Why is that? Once you are informed, you will be transformed. Once you are informed about how the spirit realm works and how the spirit realm relates to the physical realm, once you have such knowledge, you can use it. And once you have more knowledge, you will be more aware about circumstances around you. Lack of proper knowledge is lethal. Lack of proper knowledge is dangerous. That's why everyone in the late teens and everyone that's an adult has the responsibility to reflect on their own youth, to reflect on how they were raised by their parents or community, and to face how they were raised. And if you notice that there were some errors in how you were raised, you address the errors inherent now as an adult. It's not your fault that you were misled, but it is your responsibility to address it right now. You have to. It's your responsibility, because only you can do it. You are the one being haunted. So you need to admit that you're haunted and look for help. Everyone else can see that you're haunted, but if you refuse to admit you're haunted, you're participating in the misery that's afflicting you. You need to admit you're haunted and decide, I want to get out of this, I want to be better. Once you do that, there's one thing we realize very quickly, is that a lot of people around you don't want you to be better. A lot of people around you are going to sabotage you. A lot of people around you are going to try to hinder your deliverance. Why? Because they're used to the old you that they can control and blackmail. If you're haunted by generational violence, they have something on you to blackmail you and to control you. The moment they can't do that anymore, they lose their mind. So deciding that you want to be better is the first step. Recognize that most people around you don't want to be better. That's a shock. A bigger shock is that a lot of those people that don't want to be better are going to hinder you from becoming better. And if they get desperate enough, they will seek to kill you so that you don't become better. Because if you become better and they remain in darkness, that were amongst them that became better, it's going to look bad on them. So then they want you gone from the earth forever. It's on them that don't want to face things. That's not on you. Just realize that they can become dangerous towards you, even homicidal, when you are booking success forward. So some people, you need to lose them and you need to shake them off of you. That's why when you are walking by faith, often the Heavenly Father will bring you low first. But bringing you low first, the people around you will expose themselves, they will walk away from you, and by them doing that, you are freed from them. Now you can continue forward without all that weight around your neck. So Milan, it's true that when you make the decisions you want to be better, that familiar spirits want to keep you back, and there's going to be a lot of people that want to sabotage you. But hey, accept the fact that you're dealing with self-destructive people. Accept the fact that you're dealing with creepy people that insist on dysfunction instead of becoming better. And also admit that if you are breaking through, just like I said before, evil spirits will use people to hinder your breakthrough, because your breakthrough is going to loosen. Let's say your breakthrough is going to shut down the grip of evil spirits around you. So evil spirits will use people to oppose you. And with the people themselves who will oppose you, once realize that your growth or your advancement is going to look bad on them. So you have both familiar spirits as well as commoners around you that will oppose you. So it's not just evil spirits take advantage of people to oppose you. That happens. Often it's a combination of the two. Often the demons will use people who are already invested in negativity, because that's easier for them to use. But it doesn't matter if it's a combination or if it's just people or just evil spirits. It shouldn't matter. You decide, I want to be better, and you never change your decision, and you keep going forward. That's how we do it. So yes, it's not always easy, but hey, look at what's in front of you. Improvement, wealth, riches, happiness. You will leave a legacy behind. There's so much more in front of you than what you're leaving behind. Focus on what's in front of you. Now, this does not mean that you ignore the past, but you have to process the past. But you process the past by realizing that the past is over. And by processing the past, you are now affecting the future for the better. So processing the past and being focused on what's in front of you, what's ahead of you, they go hand in hand. Because you can't be focused on what's ahead of you and not process the past. Because if you don't process the past, you're stuck. So by processing the past, you can be focused on what's ahead of you, and you end up living in the present. So, prayers, decrees, declaration, all the things should be done. What all should be done is you need to decide, I will be better. If people around you want to be better, that's on them. I will be better. When you make the decision, I will be better, no demon can undo that decision. No demon can shut down the decision you want to be better, because there's nobody can do about it. Nobody can do anything about you deciding I want to be better. Once you make that decision, the demons as well as people around you are in trouble, because their ease is disrupted by you deciding I want to be better. So what the world around you tries to do is discourage you from moving forward, or they will actually sabotage you through open or covert violence. Now you can pray for the people that are opposing you as Christ instructed us to do, and you should do that, but you pray for them to become better people. You don't pray for them to be at ease. You pray for them to become better people. Now some will end up becoming better people, some will not. It's important for you not to develop hatred nor a dislike. So don't develop any aversion, whether it's dislike or hatred or hostility towards those people. Yes, they're hostile towards you, they're negative towards you, but that's them being invested in negativity. Don't invest negativity back towards them. Walk by faith, walk in love towards everyone else, and be wise enough to keep them at a distance and avoid them when they are invested negatively. That's how you do it. Don't forgive and forget, forgive and process. That's how it goes. That's how simple it is. All right. Okay, the live stream has almost been an hour. This is what I had to say for this class. I thank you for being here and listening to this live stream. If you have any questions related to this topic, you have a chance now to ask your questions. I'll stay here for 1.5 minutes. If I don't get any questions within 1.5 minutes, I'll close down the live stream. And by the way, join the Google Photos album. You can go to my community post. You have a link to the Google Photos album. Please join the album. You can fellowship with one another over there when I'm not around with a live stream. I see a lot of you already fellowshipping over there. I'm glad about that. So, okay. You have questions, I'll give you 1 minute to ask them now. If I don't get any, I'll close on the live. And if you don't have any questions and you need to leave, you can leave now. The class is over. Thanks for being here. I'll just wait now for the questions. All right. I haven't got any questions yet. Someone said demons use fire. A, the fight of the spirit overrules the fight of the demons. So use the fight of the spirit. So remain prayerful. Keep on praying, decreeing, declaring, fasting. Keep accruing Christ, and I'll see you next time.